I always tried to keep a pretty conservative demeanor on the court, and I was always, I guess, characteristically, unfazed by a lot of things that happened around me, and that was just my own personal programming because, I didn't want to get too high over any of the good moments because I didn't want to be, saddened and depressed about when things didn't go as I had planned. And, from experiencing both sides of the fence there, that just became my public demeanor. And I think the first professional game that I ever played still remains to me the most exciting moment of my professional career. I had signed a contract with the American Basketball Association, and we had gone through an exhibition season, and a lot of speculation had been created about me and my teammates and my team, and what our talent was, and that we were an exciting team to watch, and we represented something new and exciting in the game of professional basketball because we played at a fast pace. We always pushed the ball, and there was a lot of room for creativity and excitement. So our game was a lot different than what was being played in the NBA, and we featured a lot of slam dunking. And I think the first professional game was clearly different from the exhibitions and what had happened in the summer, even though I'd been on the basketball court with a lot of professionals. This is when it really counted. This was the beginning of the career. And I remember my first college game as a varsity player, and I had an exceptional game. I had a 27-point, 28-rebound game. And, I wasn't a big guy, but I was able to chase rebounds down and it set a school record in the first game. And I wanted to make a good impression. And I knew that rebounding was the strongest part of my game. I said, every shot I take tonight, I might miss because, sometimes that happens. I didn't think that was going to happen, but I knew that was a possibility, and that was something that, if it did happen, I would have to live with it. So I started trying to think of things that I definitely had control over, and I said, when that ball goes up on the board, nobody's going to pursue it harder than I. And with my jumping ability and quickness and vigor, I know I can out-rebound everybody on the floor. And, I grabbed 19 rebounds in my first professional game and somehow found a way to score 20 points. and I felt real good about it. I felt as though that this was the beginning of something good. It was something that, I had dreamed about as a kid, something that I didn't think was promised me, and I was never sure that it would happen, yet it was happening. Yet I was here, and yet it was reality, and now it was time to see what I was made of, and what I was about, and it became a real good experience, and all the things that followed after. 16 years of playing, and the playoffs and excitement of championship play, and frustration of getting knocked out, and frustration of injuries and pain, and becoming close to teammates, and then they get traded. The transition from playing with 3 different teams during 16 years, all those things. I don't think any of those things excited me as much as the first game, because I once again kind of programmed myself that this is a business, and then my role models in the business, who were the older guys on my team when I first got there, a guy like Ray Scott, Adrian Smith, Roland Taylor, these were guys who kind of took me under their wing, and really schooled me in terms of what the business was about, and that I always had to keep in my mind that I'm here because I do have a talent, and some aspects of it are unique, and I should keep that in my mind and not just feel that I'm here because people just like me and because I'm a nice guy, and sometimes I will be treated differently by a lot of people because of that talent, but don't let that become a distraction. and don't be deceived by that. You know, see it for what it is, and you know, then play the hand out. And so much of becoming a good athlete involves, you know, bringing other things to the table other than physical skills. It involves intelligence. It involves many of the things that you learn during the process of being educated. You know, how to analyze, how to assess, how to, you know, equate, how to reason. And this is what the whole elementary and secondary and even the college educational process is all about, teaching you and preparing you, you know, to be able to deal with what you ultimately have to deal with in life. And even though I was dealing with sports, which many people feel is totally physical, and people don't have to think everything is done for you and catered, you know, you're catered to, I found that to be, you know, so far removed from the truth that it's almost a joke. And the ones who become stars or superstars are the ones who have a head on their shoulders and know how to use it. I think people see commitment. Probably every team that I've played on, I've either been the captain or co-captain, and whether it's the coach's appointment or the player's vote, it's generally turned out that way. So there are a lot of athletes who have always been willing to follow my lead. I think as a youngster, the work ethic was there, practicing hard and being dedicated, and you know, not by nature being a complainer. My teammates have always related to me in that way, and I think probably the best compliment I've ever received from a teammate was that, you know, Henry Bibby told me after we played together for 2 seasons in Philadelphia that, you know, he said, of all the, you know, guys that I've ever played with, you know, I don't know if you're the best that I've ever played with, but I know you come and play every night, and because of that, I feel like, you know, we always have a chance of winning. And I thought it was a great compliment, you know, and thought about that in terms of, you know, the other aspects of my life where I need to display leadership, and sometimes I have been reluctant because I don't think it should be assume that because you're a leader in one area that you can lead in all areas. You know, some areas maybe you're better off following or at least listening and getting your feet wet, and letting it be a process of time. But in sports, for the most part, I've been given that responsibility and accepted it willingly and gladly, and thought that it fit. There were periods in my life when I would just internalize, and I decided that that's not the way to go. Had to go through trial and error. I've never been depressed in my life. Not that I recall. I might have, being a typical Pisces, might have experienced mood shifts, and but I don't remember any depression or needing to do anything or have someone bring me out of being depressed. And you know, everything is relative. I started playing professional basketball in 1971, and I played professionally for 5 seasons before going to Philadelphia. And during those 5 seasons, a lot of what transpired was kind of done in the obscurity of the American Basketball Association, which didn't have the major television contract, didn't have the exposure of the NBA. And there was a lot of success there, particularly when I played with the New York Nets, and we won the ABA championship in 2 different years. And that created a lot of expectation when I went to Philadelphia. And, you know, when I went to Philadelphia, I was 26 years old, and really sitting on the top of the world in terms of having things that anybody could wish for or want, and having, you know, family life, a professional career, plenty of friends and associates, and good reputation. You know, most of the things that were a part of a wish list that I guess could be the envy of many. And in Philadelphia, the first 5 years, I mean, when our team was put together and I became the last component to that team, it was sort of like it happened parallel to the Yankees and George Steinbrenner getting all these players together and winning the World Series. And maybe there were a lot of assumptions that in basketball that's how things worked. If you put together a lot of talent, a lot of high-priced talent that they're going to win. And the first year we were together, we were the second best team in the world. We went to the finals and we lost in 6 games, and we won the first 2 and lost the next 4. And then the team suddenly became stigmatized. It was like, well, those guys are good, but they're not winners. And I guess if you get depressed about being the second best team in the world, then you got a problem. And for me, I tried to take a leadership position and kind of explain that to my teammates and explain it to whoever would hear me. And I found myself suddenly becoming defensive about something that I didn't really think I should be defensive about. I mean, there were at that time 23 teams in the league, and we were better than 21 of them, and there was one that was better than us. And maybe we'd have another shot at that team. And as it turned out, we never got another shot at them. They never got back to the championship round. We went back 3 other times, and in the 3rd time after that, won the championship. And I think there was a sense of relief from doing that. But I don't think, for me, there ever was a time in which I got depressed over not having it. I think there were times in which, I publicly acknowledged that there was a void created because of not having it. But, a void is far from depression. And a void is something that you can live with in your life, provided, there are enough other things to compensate for things that you don't have. And I tell people and young people, and be careful what you wish for, because you might get it. And I think it's best advised to wish for things that are within your control to attain. And although that was something I wanted, I probably could have lived without it. And right now, I'm not sure how much of a difference it makes in terms of my life on a day-to-day basis, or in terms of the general perspective about me, because I firmly believe that respect is a lot more important and a lot greater than popularity. And when one becomes a world champion, they're not automatically respected. They're immensely popular because of that, because of the coverage, media coverage and exposure. And but respect is something that you garner by going through the long, hard route of giving it and receiving it, and making it solid. And it's a permanent situation, and to have the respect of a lot of people and to be a respected person is so much more important to me at this stage in my life. And if I had not won a world championship in basketball, I think that would probably still be there. And that's really what counts to me. When the crowd appreciates you, it encourages you to be a little more daring, I think. That's probably what the home court advantage is all about. When the crowd's on your side, it's easier for you to get ready to play and to get to the point where you're playing up to your potential. And generally, you'll have more players on the home team playing up to their potential than on the road team, because people react adversely to and talented people, and all professionals are talented, sometimes react adversely to being booed or jeered, or going into a foreign arena. And it takes them a little longer to get focused and to reach their full potential, and to get into stride, get into sync. And And you'll find some teams that are good home teams who are lousy road teams because of that. The perception is that the home team will always have an advantage. And when you find that you have a team that's a great team on the road, they're generally listed as a championship caliber team because they've been able to overcome this. And this is just simply, one of the psychological aspects of the game. There's physical, there's mental. And then there's a psychic side to sports, which a lot of people write about and very few people study. And I don't think I began to study it until I was in my late 20s. And so the last 8 or 9 years of my career, I spent more time into learning about the psychic side of sports because that's where there was a greater learning curve available for me versus trying to physically jump higher or shoot straighter or run faster, because that wasn't really going to happen. But the psychic side opened doors for me and opened passages for me physically and mentally, and allowed me to become a better player at an older age. And I was at age 31, 1981. I was voted as the best player in basketball and was the most valuable player in the league, and that's considered old. I mean, you have a lot of guys who start out at 20 now, and this was after playing for 10 years. And to me, I thought that was something that I needed to credit the psychic side of the sport and understanding better the psychic side of the sport with versus physically going on and doing anything any differently. I don't think it was in response to the crowd, because usually the crowd reacted after you do a good move, and so maybe the crowd's response might help to set the stage for something that happened later. But oddly enough, my particular style of play was really rooted in solid fundamental approach to playing the game, and with one exception, when handling the ball, I always would look for daylight, wherever there was daylight. And sometimes, there'd only be a little bit of daylight, like between two players, and find a way to get the ball between there and your body through there, and you make something happen. And having good peripheral vision, I would always see daylight, and maybe I could see daylight that a lot of other players couldn't see. And I see a lot of extraordinary players today, Jordan and Drexler and what have you. They see daylight where other players don't see that daylight. They see a body there, and they don't want to challenge that body, and they don't, they just don't see the daylight. And so that's a great, optic option to have. And the flamboyance wasn't intentional. The approach was results oriented, more so than reaction oriented. Trying to get the result, stop a team on defense any way you can, block a shot, steal a ball, force a turnover. Offensively, try to score, set up a teammate to score, keep it very simple. And, the result was the priority. The effect was an added bonus, I guess, that, was a part of the gift, the blessing. And, once it became very sensible business-wise, that if you do things with a certain type of that had a certain type of result and caused a certain type of reaction or effect, then it increases your market value. Sports is very much in competition for the entertainment dollar, and that's never been more clearly evident than today's NBA game. The game will be an international sport, very much in the same vein as soccer. It's probably only a close second to soccer now, and a lot more popular than soccer in a lot more markets where soccer isn't even played. This will continue to grow. The league is committed to this. I think the basketball world's committed to it. I play a role in that now in terms of the international aspect of the game. Actually, in high school, I had a buddy who I called the professor, and he called me the doctor. and his name was Leon Saunders, and we went to high school together, and then we went to college together, and we're still great friends today. And I used to call him the professor because when we would do anything, whether it was playing basketball or cards or just sitting around and shooting the breeze, he always had to have the upper hand. You know, he always could out-talk everybody, and to the point where he would lecture to me and to whoever else was around if we were willing to listen. So I just kind of dubbed him the professor one day, and he said, well, if I'm the professor, then you're the doctor. And then we kind of had professional-sounding nicknames, and we just shared that amongst ourselves. And then we ended up graduating high school together and going to college, and other people picked up on our nicknames, and then mine eventually got changed to Dr. J instead of just a doctor once I started playing professional basketball, and the team position was called Doc, and the trainer was called, well, he was called Chop, but the position became Dr. M and I became Dr. J, compliments of the guy I was rooming with in my first year, a guy named Willie Sojourner, and the Dr. J was kind of catchy, and I liked that. I said, if I'm gonna go through a name change, that's not a bad move, and it just sort of stuck since then, and you know, still here. I think I started learning lessons about being a good person long before I ever knew what basketball was. And that starts in the home, starts with the parental influence. I came from a broken home, so my mom was a major influence in my life. And you know, I remember hearing her say hundreds, thousands of times, you know, you don't have to work that hard to try and be a good person. You know, just do it. And before just do it was fashionable, see. And also, I think she would add to that, suggestion-wise, that even if there are a lot of things in life that you can't do, this is something that you can. This is a doable thing. All it requires is, you know, programming your attitude properly, and then, you know, relating to people as you would want to have them relate to you. My mom is one of 14 children, and 10 boys and 4 girls, I think. You kind of lose track with 14. But at any rate, she's, to me, a great lady. She's a Taurus. Has been a profound influence in my life, still is to this day. Born in meager surroundings in rural South Carolina. She and my dad migrated to New York, where I was born. My brother was born, my sister was born. And she continues to live in New York, and we live in Philadelphia. And she, I think, I view her as a very, very strong-willed person who understood her values very early in life, learned her lessons about dealing with people, and made family a priority. And the influence on her family, because it was such a priority for her, was, you know, clearly felt by all of us. She had to work very hard. As a matter of fact, she used to teach school when she was in South Carolina, and then she wasn't qualified to teach in New York, and she did whatever she had to do. She did domestic work. She went through the training to become a hairdresser, and rented a booth in a salon, and supported her family as best she could, and, you know, always gave us great doses of love, and made us feel special about the little material things that she could give us to, you know, help us to understand the merit system. If you came home with a good report card, A's and B's, then, you know, maybe there was a pair of tennis shoes that went along with that. Or I remember in one instance in elementary school, she knew that I liked white grapes. And she bought me a pound of white grapes, and these were all mine. And it was just so special, and it was just sort of in response to having a good report card. And something simple like that meant a lot to me. And I guess it was the gesture or thought, you know, that was behind it that still carries through today in terms of thinking that way. Well, it wasn't until I was 14 or 15 that I first heard about the Pulitzer Prize. And I started thinking about this, and I always liked poetry, and I always liked writing. And at that age, I made a declaration to my family that I was going to win a Pulitzer Prize one day. Of course, I never did, and probably never will. But I think that was pretty much evidence. That was evidence of thinking big, thinking with a more universal perspective than one's neighborhood or one's county, city, state, or even country. And I think in a lot of areas of my life, I began, as time went on, particularly in my teenage years, to think about the world and to think about the universe as, being a part of my conscious everyday life, not being narrow-minded, but being broad-minded, not being pessimistic, but optimistic. And I think that helped. I think in sports it helped a great deal, particularly as time went on when, those doors began to open that represented universal challenges. As a 20-year-old going over to the Soviet Union and participating in the Olympic Development Program for the United States, and bringing that experience back and understanding that, well, if if I can go through that type of doorway athletically, what about academically, emotionally, spiritually? Why limit yourself? If I'm going to be a whole person, let me be total, and become the complete package, and not have certain areas of my life go forward and be a 1 on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the highest, and let other areas be with the other numbers. So for me, those are things that began to happen in my teenage years, and I guess it created a perspective. There's the typical books, Moby Dick, and I guess in my adult life, I began to read biographies, more so than fiction. Started to want to relate to other people's lives, things that had really happened, and going through the sports experience and seeing how people reacted. I guess I started to understand the insincerity with someone coming up and saying, well, you're the greatest and you're the best, and saying the same thing to somebody else down the street. And although maybe a small segment of the population might mean what they say, but those are just expressions and figures of speech and things that people say because they think it might make you feel good, although it might not be based in truth because they're saying it to a lot of people. So I started, really getting into biographies and reading, particularly about Black people. Marvin Gaye's tragic biography. I guess it was called Divided Soul, the autobiography of Malcolm X. Some of the lighter publications that passed by my desk or table or whatever, reading those and just, thinking a lot about people and having, having Abraham Lincoln and John Kennedy and Jesse Owens and Bill Russell and Bill Cosby and people like that as role models. In terms of high achievers, wanted to read as much literature as I could about their lives, and then I got treated to the personal exposure, which happened as a 19-year-old meeting Bill Cosby and Bill Russell in the same year, and so much of what was going around in my mind, became my reality, and and that was real nice, and I think that helped to add to that foundation that I already had. Well, there are three teachers who are still involved in my life. Ray Wilson, who was my office manager and who was a teacher in my high school as well as my basketball coach in high school, who's very much involved in my life and is a real father figure for me. A gentleman named Earl Mosley, who never specifically taught me, but was always there and was a role model for me and was a coach when I was a freshman. And then a guy named Charles McElwain, who was a teacher and a coach. And in my high school years, those three really stood out, really helped to become part of the support group that's necessary when you're experiencing all types of, physical changes and mental changes, to help to explain things and put them in the proper perspective. And one math teacher, Mr. Nelson, who, was just genuinely a good guy. And even for 10 or 15 years after I got out of high school, I think I would kind of always want to check back, in with him or ask other people to see how he was doing. And, there were a lot of people, teachers who, who were there and made my high school experience something that, makes me feel a little saddened when I, hear of kids who really don't like, the situation and don't like the high school situation that they're in, and they come back and they say that they hate school and can't wait to get out and move on because it's not a satisfying and gratifying experience. Mine was a very satisfying and gratifying experience, and one that I look back on, and I think most of the other students who I went to high school with feel the same way because we've had reunions every 5 years, and we're approaching the 25th in 1993, and I'm sure it's going to be well attended because for many of my classmates, these were the best years of their life. I think the volume of people, volume of young people who are in the world today, who are in the country today, the population was, I guess when I was in high school, a lot closer to 200 million than it, is closer to 400 million now. It's a lot more people out there, and the classrooms are a lot bigger, and I guess the teaching profession has changed dramatically. It's not considered to be that desirable a profession to enter into. Very few people enter into it thinking that this is what they're going to do with their life. They look at the teaching profession as a bridge aspect of their career, or maybe just a springboard to other things. Well, I'll do this for a few years and then I'll move on. And so the student isn't getting exposed to the same type of people who previous generations were exposed to in the elementary, secondary, or high school levels. And that's not to criticize the ones who are there who are dedicated. I guess we're talking about quantity, because I think the quality, is still there, but the quantity of quality people and committed people has changed, and we have to deal with that. So, teachers are in sort of a position with a thankless task before them, because no matter how good they are, unless they find a way to personally, rationalize the rewards of their effort, nobody else is really going to do it for them en masse. I think it's so important for the students, to give teachers feedback that, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing, and what you're doing is good. I mean, you've helped me. You really changed my life. You really make a difference in my life. And not only it's not just about picking up a paycheck. It's about affecting people's lives on a consistent basis, and the amount of time that students are exposed to teachers is probably greater than when they're exposed, at least from September to June, to at least one of their parents. I know when I was playing basketball, I'm sure my kids saw a lot more of their mother and their teachers and their friends than they did of me, because I had half of my life on the road. So that feedback is very, very important, and I don't know if that exchange is as fluid as it was. It's one of the things that we have to acknowledge as being different, and it's made it tougher to be a young person today. All of the information that they have to assess and assimilate and sort out and analyze and then make decisions about. I can really understand their confusion and sympathize with them because of that. And there are a lot of reasons why, and I've only named a few. I think I was chosen by basketball because although I never really physically got drafted to any team that I played for, the only team that drafted me I never played for, which was the Milwaukee Bucks. I think that, my God-given physical attributes, big hands and big feet, the way that I'm built, proportionate-wise, just made, basketball the most inviting sport for me to play. And from the first time I picked up a basketball at age 8, and I had a lot of difficulty, when I first picked up a basketball because I was a scrub. There were things that I liked about it, and although I wasn't good, there were things that that I liked about it, and I could always handle the ball pretty well, even though I couldn't shoot it straight, and wasn't a good defender, and fundamentally had to spend countless hours above and beyond the basic time to try and perfect fundamentals, and so there was a relationship there, and it was, it was a two-way street. I liked the game, I enjoyed the game, and the game fed me enough and gave me enough, rewards to reinforce that this is something that I should spend time doing, and that I could possibly make a priority in my life versus other sports. If someone gave me a choice of playing football, basketball, baseball, golf, tennis, hockey, or whatever, I would think that basketball would be my favorite, because it was best for me, and it had chosen me, and as time passed on, that became more and more true, and even with respect to my physical growth, I was never given too much too quickly. When I was a freshman in high school, I was, maybe 5'9", 5'10", and as a sophomore, 5'11", approaching 6 feet. As a junior, I was 6'1", and when I graduated high school, I was 6'3". When I got out of college, I was 6'5.5", pushing 6'6", and I continued to grow till I was 25 years old. So it wasn't a matter of being a finished product who had reached full potential at an early age. Everything happened in stages. There was always room for improvement. Right up until the time I retired at age 37, I mean, I felt like there were still things that I could do better, and so the relationship with the game was a real full relationship in which there was a lot of give and take, and there were a lot of stages that were just ongoing, and I pulled the plug on it at a time that I thought was right for me to exit, and fortunately the perception, and in my heart I felt as though I could still continue to play, and the public basically thought the same thing, that I could still continue to play. I still hear it today. How come you don't go back and play? And this is 5 years after retiring. However, I had made up in my mind, what I thought my standards were, and I didn't feel as though I could continue to play at that standard, and I didn't want to, just become a reserve player or a bench player. And it was time to move on, take on another challenge. And And that process had already started during the later years of my career. So, I was letting go of one thing in order to fully embellish and be committed to other things. And I thought that was the right move. I didn't really view it as the height of my career, but I felt there was a curve that I had to adhere to, and now I had, gone past my prime, and I was at a segment in the curve where there could be a real serious drop-off, and I was no longer in control of a lot of the circumstances surrounding how I would be able to perform, just in terms of playing time and role on the team and what have you. I could go out there and be respected, but I wasn't the one who would have the final say-so, and I had experienced that before. So if you've experienced having control and having the final say-so, you don't want to be moved to a subordinate position if you have your druthers, and I think I've had my druthers. Take the time to assess your talent yourself, and then be willing to listen to others who can tell you what you have and what you don't have, and just deal with the reality of the situation, the statistics. If it's 350 basketball players, 350 million people in America, then you're 1 in a million if you're going to make it into the pro ranks. And now with the game becoming a world game, as it is, there'll be more professional teams, which will create more jobs. But proportionately speaking, if you start dealing with the world with 3 billion people or more, the percentages become even less that you'll make it. And that's just getting in the door. Now that you will become a superstar, then it shrinks again. So you have to adhere to the statistical realities, and once again, getting back to education, mathematics, arithmetic. Sit down and look at the numbers, and see how you stack up in those numbers, and then see whether the sacrifice that you have to make is really worth the risk that you're taking. And I'm saying this not to discourage, only to help you gain a proper perspective, because I think that there are a lot of young, aggressive and talented, gifted athletes out there who do have professional potential, and we would like to see good, healthy competition for all of those jobs and for those positions in terms of our society, which are role model positions and leadership positions. And it should be a lot of competition going after them. And then the ones who, bring the goods and who are able to take better advantage of the opportunities, they're the ones who will make it. They're the ones who will survive. We'll get the cream of the crop. And those who, fall by the wayside will end up at different levels. They won't be non-achievers, but, they just won't be the ultimate with respect to becoming professionals. And those who make it, I think they will have made it because they were faithful to what they were committed to. They were available to be taught. They understood the value of being taught. They will try to teach others, and in trying to teach others, they will learn a lot about themselves and learn a lot about their sport. And I guess they will be teachable. They will be people who you can, who you can say something to, who you can give a game plan to, teach how to play the game, and then they will be able to go out and use their talent and execute it. After a certain amount of preparation, they will be able to go out and physically execute what it is that you've talked about trying to do, and some will be extraordinary, so that when even the preparation and the execution don't produce the desired result, they'll be able to bring a little something extra to the table. They'll be resourceful enough to adapt and still win when the game plan's not working. And I guess those are a few things that we could tell them. I'm in business full time, and I have become, I guess, a person in pursuit of entrepreneurial endeavors, and I'm involved in business with partners and with associates that it's taken me on an interesting journey right now. It does take care of my financial needs, which I think was one of the things on my list of priorities to do: safety and security of my family and financial well-being, being with the haves versus the have-nots, and not to separate myself from the have-nots, but to live the lifestyle that I was accustomed to living when I was a professional athlete. One of the commitments that I personally have now is to be diverse in my approach to buying, participating in the buying of businesses, the operation of those businesses, and I guess one of the things in the back of my mind is that I never want to be, again, after my sports experience, totally consumed by any one endeavor other than my family life. And so that has led me down an interesting trail where presently, right now, I'm one of the owners of a bottling company in Philadelphia Coca-Cola Bottling Company, a cable television station in New Jersey called Garden State Cable, and a affiliate television station in Buffalo, New York, with a company we call Queen City Broadcasting. And so that kind of puts me in into varied fields of endeavor, ones that as a owner, I have the latitude of plugging into any particular aspect of the business that I feel comfortable with. I think from my sports experience and from the business training that I've have been afforded during the 20 years of preparation, for my 40s. I feel that public relations and promotion are two areas which I'm best suited. So I have elected to stay associated as a spokesman and as a consultant and a member of the advisory staff of several companies that I was affiliated with in my sports career. Spalding Sporting Goods Company, the Converse Shoe Company, and new relationships with Dr. Scholl's, Shearing Plow Company, and Jiffy Lube. And so I'm wearing a lot of hats these days, as well as doing some public speaking for as a client of the Washington Speakers Bureau, and serving as a director for a arm of the NBA called the NBA International, which is responsible for laying the skeletal structure for the expansion of professional basketball around the world, and at the same time consulting with a few other entities on a smaller scale, just to kind of fill out the schedule. No 2 weeks have been the same since I retired, and that's something that, since this is my 5th year out of professional basketball, I'm at a point now where I really want to evaluate and make a decision whether I want more consistency and continuity, or I want things to continue in that mode. And so this is I guess is a transitional time. There are things that are fixed that that I have to do and that I elect to do, but things are subject to change, and that's really one of the beauties of sort of life as a free agent right now, and a lot of job opportunities I've turned down because I think it would restrict me in terms of having the choice when to go and when not to go, and who to align and associate with, and that's something I'm not too quick to give up right now. So, life goes by so fast, and you have young kids. When during my career, all my children were born while I was a professional athlete. It was the only lifestyle they knew before I retired, and many people started asking me, as well as asking them and asking my family about, well, how do you adjust to this lifestyle of being a professional athlete? And there was no adjustment for them. It's what they knew. The adjustment came after, after I got out, and it's still going on. There were 3 tragedies in my life, and actually a 4th, which all involved immediate family members, and my brother was the first. And I was 19, he was 16. He died of lupus erythematosus, and it was just devastating. Actually, it wasn't the first. My father had died before my brother, but my father didn't live with us, and my brother's was the most devastating because in our family there were 2 boys and a girl, and so it left me as the only male in the family and the one who was designated to carry on the family name. And there were a lot of times in my life in which I tried to, rationally and maybe too secularly, think of why this had happened to my family and to me, and personalize it in that way. And I never really came up with the answers until I started to find myself spiritually and make a spiritual commitment, and just start trusting that God's wisdom and judgment is more important than anything that I could ever think of, and the mystery will be unlocked in time with my having faith, and faith that I will come to understand. And this is, to a large degree, how I've lived my life, taking a faithful stand, and it's enabled me to, deal with, losing a stepfather and then losing my sister in my lifetime, and still moving on, still, going forward, still gaining strength from each experience, as though there are things that, I have to do for me and for them, as well as for a family that I'm still left with and blessed with. The more successful people in life, and I've found this to be true, have this resiliency about them, where no matter what comes down the pike, they're not going to quit, and they're not going to be blown out of the water, and they're not going to exit from the game unless it's their choice. And if it's their choice to exit from the game, they're exiting because they got something else to do. And it's sort of like, I guess the old expression that, it's better to not succeed than it is to not try. Fail because you don't succeed rather than not try. And if you don't try, you're guilty of, a crime that in business and in sports or whatever would be considered the cardinal sin. Always give your best effort. Always try. You might come up a little bit short. But have this intestinal fortitude within you, have this attitude programmed, understand who you are, what you can bring to the table, and then bring that to the table. And where the pieces fall, they fall. So I think, that the resiliency to deal with good times as well as bad times, and still remain focused and still remain purposeful and true in your quest for worthy things in life, is part of the character that one has to have to be successful. There are a lot of technical things that you have to understand, a lot of fundamental things that you need to be a part of your makeup. But you're way ahead of the game. You're way ahead of the game if you have this knack for being resilient, resourceful. I would go back to being respected, because I have to deal with this each and every day of my life. And each and every day of my life, when I go to a public place, someone might recognize me or might not. That doesn't make or break my day. The thing that I walk in expecting is that whether they recognize me or not, that I'm going to be treated with respect. And I want to project that. I want to project that when I walk into a room, I'm a man walking in who's going to command respect, and without opening my mouth and not expecting, anything from anyone that they're not capable of giving. And I think you get it when you command it. And I feel very fortunate that this is something that I experience every day, and it feels real nice, and it makes me proud, and it makes me proud to know that a lot of people ask me to accommodate them with different things, signing autographs or personal exchanges or projects or whatever, and I can say no, and they're not going to freak out. They're going to be put off. They're not going to think that it's a condescending thing. They're going to understand that because they have respect for me, that this is an inconvenience at this time, or it's just something that I choose not to do. And they're not going to, try and beat a dead horse anymore. So this is feeling the other side of the fence, after coming through a lot of wars and a lot of experiences in which the respect, wasn't there. I mean, people just, felt, well, I can just run over you or take advantage of you and, assume, make assumptions. And now, there is a respect there, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I want that to continue, and I want to continue to command that.